Hi everyone, welcome back again to our course. And for today, let's discuss about the morality of law, specifically eternal and natural law. Okay? So, I would like to first to emphasize the norms of morality, no? So, one very important element by which human conduct is determined and assessed in terms of morality is in reference of its norms. So, what is a norm? A norm is understood as a rule, standard, or measure, no? Specifically, it is something by which an act or conduct is measured as good or bad, right or wrong, moral or immoral. So, in a very sense, the norm of morality is the standard of rightness and wrongness in human actions. So, this is the precise very reason why certain actions are considered to be good and others as bad. So, the norms of morality is the standards that indicate the rightfulness or wrongfulness, the goodness or evilness, the value or disvalue of human conduct, as according to agape. Okay, so there are two types of norms or standards by which human actions are gauged to be either good or bad. The first norm of morality is the eternal divine law, no, which is so-called the ultimate and absolute norm of morality. So this ultimate norm is independent of any standard there is, whatever there might be. So it is very objective in its perspective. On the other hand, the second norm or standard of morality by which human actions are judged to be good or evil is human reason as related to the person's conscience, telling him or her internally, no, what is should be done and what should not be done, what is good from what is evil or bad. This norm is found in the subject, so hence it is very subjective in its perspective. Okay, so let's move on to law. How or what is the definition of a law? Law, in its broadest sense, is a rule or norm which governs nature or actions of things. Also generally understood siya as any constant way of acting or reacting or any directive rule of activity. So all beings in the world, both animate or inanimate, are under some sort of law. There is a law that governs the movements of the planets in the solar system. 'Di ba? There are also law that governs the growth of plants and other living things like mammals. And there is a law that governs our biological systems, the human growth, the human body. In its narrowest sense, kumbaga, law refers to the free acts of man as rational beings. So in relation and in the specific context of ethics and morality, law is understood as the rule of conduct which governs, directs, or regulates the free acts of men. Okay? So it should always be in accordance with human reason. Okay, so a moral law is what we can say that according to St. Thomas, he defines it as an ordinance of reason for the common good, promulgated, no, by the one who has the care of the community. So the goal of the moral law is for the betterment, no, of the community. Okay, so to say that the law is an ordinance simply means it is a command, no, or directive emanating from a legitimate authority. And since it is an order, it should be binding upon the subjects to obey. A law in this sense is not just a request, but a command. Ayon. So let's move forward to the essential elements for a law to be reasonable. For a law to be reasonable, it should contain the following elements. Okay? So number one, it must be just. Okay, this means that law should not command what is morally wrong or evil. It must promote and uphold the inherent rights and dignity of every human person. No? It should be rightful. Number 2, it must be honest. This means that a law should not contradict to, or in essence, to any higher law. It should also be consistent within itself. So, a law should always be right, okay? On a sense that it should be consistent to everything that happens to us, to everything that happens to society. Number 3, it must be possible of fulfillment. It means that people who are obliged by a law to follow it it should be without extreme difficulty. A law that is simply beyond the normal capacity of an ordinary individual to fulfill it. Strictly speaking, not a law but meant for humans, but one which is for angels. So kailangan, it should be possible to comply. Hindi siya sobrang hirap gawin and applicable for everyone. Number 4, it must be relatively permanent. This means that a law, once established and enacted, should be more or less stable, meaning it must be something that continues to be binding on the subjects unless repealed or amended with good reason by the legitimate authority or its proper or rightful representatives. So again, it means it should be stable, okay? It should be for everyone, okay? It should be for all, no? And it should be amended by good reason. Kailangan hindi siya nawawala. Permanent siya all throughout. Number 5, it must be promulgated or enacted. So this means that a law, in order to be followed by the subjects, must be made known or publicized to them in a language or manner that is understandable so that they can comply with it. So it should be implemented yung law. Like for instance, sa city, in Davao City, diba, sa Davao City, an ordinance in Davao, for example, the garbage waste segregation, before it was implemented to the public, it was made public, diba? It was published in local dailies as well as in other mediums, TV, radio, posters, diba? Leaflets, and other forms of media. It should be well known to others. Number 6, it must be directed to the common good. This means that a law should promote the general welfare rather than just serve to a few individuals. So a law that only benefits a privileged sector cannot be considered a law in the truest and finest sense of the word. Thus, a law should always be for the good of all or the entire community. So it means that wala dapat special treatment, no? There should always be fairness for the common good of everyone. Okay, number 7. So, it must be promulgated by the one who has the care of the community. So, this means that a law should be enforced or established by a competent and legitimate authority. So, be it as a single person, like a president, a prime minister, a sultan or head of state, or a group of persons like the city council in the local level or the Senate and Congress in the national level. So, ayun. So, they are the ones na nag-intimate or they're the ones who promulgate or yung gumagawa and they implement it to everyone na nasasakupan nila. Okay. So, those are the essential elements for a law to be considered reasonable. Now, let's move forward to the divisions of the law. I've mentioned it a while ago. We have eternal law and natural moral law. Okay, let's start first with eternal law. Eternal law is essentially God's grand design in creating the universe, including the assigning to each creature therein a specific nature. This is according to agape. Okay, so in this sense, the eternal law provides for the cosmic order where every creature stands different and independent, but not apart from the unified purpose of creation. So, according to St. Augustine, the highly recognized as one of the former church fathers in the history of Christendom, God from the very beginning had a plan for the whole universe, which he created out of his infinite goodness and love. This is what he considered as the eternal law. Thus, for Augustine, the eternal law is the divine reason and will, commanding the natural order of things be preserved and forbidding that it to be disturbed. So for Thomas Aquinas, another intellectual giant of the church, the eternal law thou is the exemplar of divine wisdom as directing all actions and movements. Ayun. So God's eternal law reveals the necessary relations between the Creator and the creatures. Okay. Ayun. So let's move to the thoughts of Monsignor Paul Glenn. According to him, the eternal law extends to all acts and movements in the universe. Thus, bodies obey the tendencies of their nature and follow the laws of cohesion, gravity, inertia, and etc. Animals follow the guidance of instinct. The earth turns upon its axis. The heavenly bodies swing through their mighty orbit, all in accordance with the eternal law, powerless to reject its influence or to disobey. So that's according to Monsignor Paul Glenn, Also, according to Thomas Aquinas, the whole universe is governed by divine reason. God is the prince of the universe. The plan of government he has in his mind bears the character of a law. And because it is conceived in eternity and not in time, it is rightly called the eternal law. This is in accordance to the Summa Theologica 1-2. Alright, so with God's divine reason at work in all of creation from the very beginning, God is not unmindful about his plans being carried out to cosmic history or to the universe. He directs men and all things to their proper end and in harmony with their nature. So for God or for the Creator, this is the very purpose for the existence, For the direction of men and all things to their proper end and in harmony with their nature. Okay, now let's move forward to the properties of the eternal law. So, the eternal law is eternal and unchangeable since the author of the eternal law is God himself, who is eternal. The eternal law has also existed from all eternity, in the very mind of God even before the creation of the universe. So it exists all throughout the span of time, from beginning up until the end. The eternal law is absolutely universal. So the absolute universality of the eternal law extends to all things and actions, either free, contingent, or necessary. So it means there is no limit to the breadth of its application to corporeal and spiritual, to rational and irrational creatures. Therefore, the eternal law applies to all things, regardless of the level and form of their existence. So, again, it's absolutely universal. It applies to all creatures. Okay. Alright, so that's the discussion for eternal law. Let's move forward to the natural moral law. So the natural moral law is also known as the law of conscience. So eternal law is promulgated to the creatures by God himself by being embedded in their nature. So to man, the eternal law is made known by his own reason or conscience. So by conscience, we mean the reason or the pronouncing practical judgment on the morality of actions. So the law of conscience or the natural moral law is also called as the natural law, lex naturalis. It is nothing else but the same eternal law made known to man by reason. So God has written his law not on blocks of marble or on scrolls of paper, but on the heart of man. So this is how humankind interpret the eternal law written or made by God or the Creator. So most thinkers in the Christian tradition maintain that eternal law is nothing else no? But eternal law revealing and manifesting itself in man's natural reason or conscience. Natural law and eternal law can be one and the same, no? Pwede daw sila maging isa for the fact that they have one and the same goal. The goal which is directing man's action towards the attainment of their proper end. So the oneness of the two laws gives us the view that the natural law is man's participation in the eternal law. Again, when we say natural moral law, this is how man, okay, this is how man interprets, recognizes, or how he receives the eternal law set or given by God or the Creator. This is how he responded to the eternal law. Okay. Hence, by its or her rational nature, the person knows naturally the fundamental enunciation of the natural law. So here are the following. These are some of the example of the enunciation set by natural law. Okay, like do good and avoid evil. Right order must be preserved. Murder, lying, and stealing are wrong and are therefore forbidden. Okay. So, also again, we can say that the natural law is the eternal law itself, which man understands through the light of his natural reason. By nature, the person as the rational being can by himself or herself discover a rule of action which governs the activity of all free beings. One perceives too that some actions are right and some actions are wrong, that every person is bound to perform right actions and to avoid the wrong ones. Alright, so let's move forward to the attributions of natural law. So various authors and writers on the natural law usually has insights or thoughts of or the properties about the natural law and how should one possess it. Here are some. Number 1, natural law is obligatory. The natural law is said to carry with it an obligatory element precisely because it imposes upon men the moral obligation to follow it as necessary condition to attain the last end or the ultimate source or the ultimate end, which is happiness, the union of all, or to be with nature in harmony, no? It also declares to man his moral duty as to speak the voice of authority. So yun, obligation siya. Natural law is universal. Number 2, the natural law is said to be universal in its character, in the sense that it is applicable to all, no? Regardless of differences in their culture, tradition, nationality, religion, political beliefs, races, individual temperaments, ethnicity, and etc. So it should be applicable to all creatures, to everyone. Number 3, natural law has its proper sanctions. So since, as just mentioned, kanina, no, natural law possesses an obligatory character. It also has its own sanctions, punishments, or penalties, okay, for those na hindi makaka-follow or for those who do not obey the commands. Number 4, natural law is knowable or recognizable. So the natural law is one law that is open to all the rational beings to discover. And since the person has the natural power of reason and intellect to know certain truths about his or her own being, having been imprinted in his or her nature, he or she then can know what this law concerns or ano yung purpose, okay? What this law concerning his or her own being requires. So he will know ano yung dapat niyang gawin. Number 5, the natural law is immutable or unchangeable. Since the author of the natural law is God himself, whose divine decrees emanate from His unchanging and immutable nature, God as always, God forever and ever, from beginning up until the end, His commands will always be the same as He conceived them from the very beginning in His infinite mind. So having shared the immutability of the eternal law and the very nature of God, as well as the constancy of human nature itself, human nature is essentially the same, and that it should be same for all. So the natural law will always remain as it is, no subject to any changes at any time or anywhere, unlike human or civil laws. Okay, so those are the attributes for natural law. And again, I hope you've learned something for today. Sana nakatulong to sa inyo, sa pag-intindi nyo about laws. Thank you so much, and this is the end of my discussion. Thank you so much for listening, and goodbye.